during campaign, spokesman says. Vice President Mike Pence did not meet with any officials associated with the Russian government during the 2016 campaign, his spokesman said on Thursday after repeatedly dodging the question on Wednesday. Pence's spokesman, Mark Lauder, was asked 3 times on Wednesday on Fox News whether Pence had any such meetings, but declined to answer. He sought to rectify that on Thursday. The vice president had no meetings with any individual associated with the Russian government during the campaign or transition, Lauder said in a statement. Pence is the latest high-ranking official in President Donald Trump's orbit to deny having met with any officials linked to the Russian government during the campaign. The denial comes after it was recently revealed that Donald Trump Jr., senior White House advisor Jared Kushner and former campaign chairman Paul Manafort met with a Kremlin-linked lawyer in June 2016 to get what they hoped would be damaging information about Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. In the wake of that revelation, Pence's office released a statement distancing himself from the meeting. The vice president was not aware of the meeting. He is not focused on stories about the campaign, particularly stories about the time before he joined the ticket, Lauder said earlier this week. Pence's office has since said it's offensive to suggest the statement was intended to create distance between Pence and Trump. The vice president has found himself in uncomfortable positions in recent months when attempting to defend the administration from Russia-related criticisms. He said on national television during the transition that Michael Flynn had not discussed sanctions with the Russian ambassador in a series of phone calls, a claim that was later revealed to be untrue. Flynn, who Trump tapped as national security advisor, was fired. Pence also stated that no one from the campaign had met with officials linked to the Russian government, a claim that has now been debunked by the Trump Jr. admission. Other administration officials, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions, have had to retroactively reveal meetings they had with Russian officials during the campaign. The White House said on Wednesday that there was no deliberate effort to conceal such meetings. Every single day we do our best to give the most accurate information that we have, and we continue to do that every single day, and have offered to be as transparent as possible with all committees and anyone looking into this matter, Principal Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said on Wednesday when pressed on the matter. Trump doesn't blame son for meeting with Russian lawyer. President Donald Trump was unaware until just recently that his son met last summer with a Russian lawyer promising incriminating information from her government about Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, he told Reuters in an interview Wednesday, but he does not blame Donald Trump Jr. for taking the meeting. I think many people would have held that meeting, the president said. Most of the phony politicians who are Democrats who I watched over the last couple of days, most of those phonies that act holier than thou, if the same thing happened to them, they would have taken that meeting in a heartbeat. Trump Jr.'s meeting last June with Russian attorney Natalia Veselnitskaya, who the president's son had been told in an email possessed information on Clinton from the Russian government. The president's son replied that if it's what you say I love it, especially later in the summer, according to versions of the email exchanged published by the New York Times and by Trump Jr. himself. The meeting is the strongest evidence yet of cooperation between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, which the U.S. intelligence community has blamed for a campaign of cyber attacks that targeted Democratic institutions and individuals in an effort to aid the president's candidacy. That Trump Jr. took a meeting with the expectation of receiving information from the Russian government on Clinton contradicts assurances from multiple campaign and White House officials, including from Trump Jr. himself, that no such meetings ever took place. The president's son has sought to downplay the meeting, which was also attended by then campaign chairman Paul Manafort and top advisor Jared Kushner, since its existence was first reported. The meeting lasted only 20 minutes. He has said, and no useful information on Clinton was ever received. The bulk of the meeting, he said, focused on issues surrounding Russian adoptions. And while Trump claimed not to have known about the meeting until a couple of days ago, he told Reuters that the promise of opposition research on a political opponent would prompt almost anyone to accept a meeting. Trump Jr.'s meeting, the president noted, predated the wave of cyber attacks that would take on a massive role in the presidential election later in the summer. You have to understand, when that took place, this was before Russia fever, Trump said. There was no Russia fever back then, that was at the beginning of the campaign, more or less. There was no Russia fever. Sessions releases questionnaire excerpt that omitted meetings with Russians. The Justice Department released a portion of Attorney General Jeff Sessions' background check questionnaire Thursday, confirming that he did not report meetings with the Russian ambassador or any other foreign nationals when he was being vetted for a security clearance earlier this year. Sessions' aides confirmed in May that he had not listed 2 meetings with the Russians or hundreds of other meetings with foreign officials, but a liberal watchdog group filed a lawsuit for a copy of the relevant question and answer from Sessions' questionnaire, known as Standard Form 86 or more commonly, an SF-86. Have you or any member of your immediate family in the past 7 years had any contact with a foreign government, its establishment, such as embassy, consulate, agency, military service, intelligence or security service, etc., or its representatives, whether inside or outside the U.S.? Answer: no if the contact was for routine visa applications and border crossings related to either official U.S. government travel or foreign travel on a U.S. passport, reads the form disclosed Thursday to American Oversight in response to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. The box next to the word no is marked with an X. Sessions' aides say an assistant helping him complete the form was told by the FBI that he did not have to list meetings held in his official capacity as a U.S. Senator. Sessions says he was acting as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee when he had the meetings. The FBI has not commented on whether Sessions completed the form accurately or whether an FBI employee in fact said such meetings were exempt from the reporting requirement. Sessions found himself in hot water with his former Democratic colleagues in March when it emerged that he had held meetings with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak, despite Sessions having said at his confirmation hearing that he had not had any interaction with Russian officials and knew nothing about their alleged efforts to influence the 2016 election. Sessions was a top advisor to Donald Trump during his campaign. "I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians," the Attorney General said in January. Sessions later told reporters that he understood the question to be about campaign-related contacts with the Russians and he did not think to mention any official meetings he'd held in his Senate offices. As late as Wednesday evening, Justice Department officials indicated to American Oversight that all the information the group was seeking was being withheld on privacy grounds as well as over concerns about disclosing confidential law enforcement techniques and procedures. However, in a CO filing early Thursday, Justice Department lawyers said Sessions had authorized the release of the relevant question and answer. Notwithstanding defendants' appropriate assertion of FOIA exemptions over the information contained in the record requested by plaintiff, the Department of Justice, in consultation with the Attorney General, has consented to a discretionary release of this record, Justice Department attorneys wrote. A Justice Department spokesman declined to comment Thursday. The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Representative John Conyers of Michigan, called for Sessions to amend his disclosure and for the House panel to delve into the issue. "It is deeply disturbing, but no longer terribly surprising, that a senior member of the Trump administration appears to have misled the FBI about his contacts with the Russian government," Conyers said in a statement. "It is imperative that the House Judiciary Committee investigate this matter. At a minimum, the government should immediately review whether the Attorney General remains qualified to hold a security clearance, and Mr. Sessions must submit a corrected form to the authorities detailing any and all contacts with foreign governments." American Oversight suit also seeks any notes the FBI has about how it learned of Sessions' meetings with the Russians and any inquiry the agency made into those contacts. No such information was turned over Thursday. At hearing before U.S. District Court Judge Randolph Moss Thursday, a Justice Department attorney said notes from the background check don't address the Russian meetings. That would seem to indicate that Sessions didn't disclose his Russian contacts to the background investigators during his interviews, and that the FBI didn't find the information on its own, Austin Evers of American Oversight said. While Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, the American oversight request and suit did not prompt the FBI to assert the FOIA exemption most commonly used to withhold materials related to pending investigations. Jeff Sessions is our nation's top law enforcement officer, and it is shocking one of his first acts after being named Attorney General was to lie to the FBI on an issue of national security, Evers said. It's one thing to know that the Attorney General lied on his security clearance form, but it's another to see a potential felony in black and white. Mr. Sessions has advised federal prosecutors across the country to charge defendants with the most serious crimes, carrying the toughest penalties. Special Counsel Robert Mueller should take him at his Trump, I wish I asked Putin, were you actually supporting me? President Donald Trump said Wednesday that he pressed Russian President Vladimir Putin multiple times during their meeting last week on the Kremlin's efforts to interfere in last year's presidential election. But there's one question Trump did not ask of his Russian counterpart that he now wishes he had: were you actually supporting me? That Russia was behind a wave of election year cyber attacks against democratic institutions and individuals, and that those attacks were intended to aid Trump's candidacy, has been the assessment of the U.S. intelligence community for months, a conclusion the president himself has been hesitant to accept wholeheartedly. Instead, he has suggested that other nations, or perhaps other individuals or entities, could have been to blame for the attacks, possibilities that have not been raised publicly by any U.S. intelligence official. In an interview with Reuters, Trump hypothesized that many of his campaign positions, such as building up the U.S. military and energy industry, run counter to Russia's interests. For that reason, the president suggested that he might not have actually been the Kremlin's preferred candidate, wondering aloud, why would Putin want me? It's really the one question I wish I would have asked Putin: were you actually supporting me? Trump said. I would bet that inwardly Putin would have been against me. The president called his meeting with Putin productive, highlighting a ceasefire in a region of Syria negotiated between the U.S. and Russia that went into effect last weekend and has largely held. He predicted that he and Putin could eventually solve the ongoing civil war in Syria, where the U.S. and Russia have backed opposing sides, as well as in Ukraine, where Russia has stoked fighting in the eastern part of the nation. I was very tough with President Putin. We have a very important relationship, Trump said. It's going to be a relationship where lots of lives could be saved, like as an example with a ceasefire, which nobody else could have gotten but me. On the question of interference into last year's election, Trump told Reuters that something happened and that we have to find out and get to the bottom of what's going on, because we can't have even the slightest suspicion about our election process. But he once again raised doubts that Russia was to blame, remarking that somebody did say if Putin did do it, you wouldn't have found out about it. Which is a very interesting point. And despite recent revelations that his son met last June with a Russian lawyer who he had been told possessed damaging information from the Kremlin about Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, Trump remained insistent that there had been no cooperation between his campaign and Moscow. Donald Trump Jr. has said there was no information gleaned from the meeting, but that it happened at all has called into question past assurances from Trump's team that there was no cooperation or communication with the Russian government at all. But even with proof that his son had sought information on Clinton from the Kremlin, Trump maintained that his campaign had no ties to the Russian government. There was zero coordination. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's no coordination, this was a hoax, this was made up by the Democrats, he said. This is the greatest con job in history, where a party sits down the day after they got their ass kicked, and they say, what's our excuse?